The Castle by Franz Kafka. Chapter 2. I am your narrator. When by a turn in the road, Kay recognized that they were near the inn, he was greatly surprised to see that the darkness had already set in. Had he been gone for such a long time? Surely not for more than an hour or two by his reckoning. And it had been morning when he left, and he had not felt any need of food. And just a short time ago it had been uniform daylight, and now the darkness of night was upon them. Short days, he said to himself, slipped off the sledge and went towards the inn. At the top of the little flight of steps leading into the house stood the landlord, a welcome figure holding up a lighted lantern. Remembering his conductor for a fleeting moment, Kay stood still. There was a cough in the darkness behind him that was he. Well, he would see him again soon. Not until he was level with the landlord, who greeted him humbly, did he notice two men, one on either side of the doorway. He took the lantern from his host's hand and turned the light upon them. It was the men he had already met, who were called Arthur and Jeremiah. They now saluted him. They reminded him of his soldering days, happy days for him, and he laughed. "Who are you?" he asked, looking from one to the other. "Your assistants," they answered. "It's your assistants," corroborated the landlord in a low voice. "What?" said Kay. "Are you my old assistants whom I told to follow me and who I am expecting?" They answered in the affirmative. "That's good," observed Kay after a short pause. "I'm glad you've come." "Well," he said, after another pause, "you've come very late. You're very slack." "It was a long way to come," said one of them. "A long way?" repeated Kay. "But I met you just now, coming from the castle." "Yes," they said without further explanation. "Where is the apparatus?" asked Kay. "We haven't any," said they. "The apparatus I gave you," said Kay. "We haven't any," they reiterated. "Oh, you are fine fellows," said Kay. "Do you know nothing about surveying?" "No," said they. "But if you are my old assistants, you must know something about it," said Kay. They made no reply. "Well, come in," said Kay, pushing them before him into the house. They sat down then, all three of them, together over their beer at a small table, saying little. Kay in the middle with an assistant on each side. As on the other evening, there was only one other table occupied by a few peasants. "You're a difficult problem," said Kay, comparing them, as he had done several times. "How am I to know one of you from the other? The only difference between you is your names. Otherwise, you're as like as..." He stopped, and then went on involuntarily. "You're as like two snakes." They smiled. People usually manage to distinguish us quite well, they said, in self-justification. I'm sure they do, said Kay. I was a witness of that myself. But I can only see you with my own eyes, and with them I can distinguish you. So I shall treat you as if you were one man, and call you both Arthur. That's one of your names. Yours, isn't it? He asked one of them. No, said the man. I'm Jeremiah. It doesn't matter, said Kay. I'll call you both Arthur. If I tell Arthur to go anywhere, you must both go. If I give Arthur something to do, you must both do it. That has the great disadvantage for me of preventing me from employing you on separate jobs, but the advantage that you will both be equally responsible for anything I tell you to do. How you divide the work between you doesn't matter to me. Only you're not to excuse yourselves by blaming each other. For me, you're only one man. They considered this and said, we shouldn't like that at all. I don't suppose so, said Kay. Of course you won't like it, but that's how it has to be. For some little time, one of the peasants had been sneaking round the table, and Kay had noticed him. Now the fellow took courage and went up to one of the assistants to whisper something. Excuse me, said Kay, bringing his hand down on the table and rising to his feet. These are my assistants, and we're discussing private business. Nobody is entitled to disturb us. Sorry, sir, sorry, muttered the peasant anxiously, retreating backwards towards his friends. And this is my most important charge to you, said Kay, sitting down again. You're not to speak to anyone without my permission. I am a stranger here, and if you are my old assistants, you are strangers too. We 3 strangers must stand by each other, therefore. Give me your hands on that. All too eagerly, they stretched out their hands to Kay. Never mind the trimming, said he, but remember that my command holds good. I shall go to bed now, and I recommend you to do the same. Today we have missed a day's work, and tomorrow we must begin very early. You must get hold of a slave for taking me to the castle and have it ready outside the house at 6 o'clock. Very well, said one, but the other interrupted him. You say very well, and yet you know it can't be done. Silence, said Kay. You're trying already to disassociate yourselves from each other. But then the first man broke in. He's right. It can't be done. No stranger can get into the castle without a permit. Where does one apply for a permit? I don't know. Perhaps to the castellan? Then we'll apply by telephone. Go and telephone to the castellan at once, both of you. They rushed to the instrument, asked for the connection. How eager they were about it. In externals, they were absurdly docile, and inquired if Kay could come with them next morning into the castle. The no of the answer was audible even to Kay at his table. But the answer went on and was still more explicit. It ran as follows: neither tomorrow nor at any other time. I shall telephone myself, said Kay, and got up. While Kay and his assistants hitherto had passed nearly unremarked, except for the incident with the one peasant, his last statement aroused general attention. They all got up when Kay did, and although the landlord tried to drive them away, crowded round him in a close semicircle at the telephone. The general opinion among them was that Kay would get no answer at all. Kay had to beg them to be quiet, saying he did not want to hear their opinion. The receiver gave out a buzz of a kind that Kay had never heard before on a telephone. It was like the hum of countless children's voices, but yet not a hum, the echo rather of voices singing at an infinite distance, blended by sheer impossibility into one high but resonant sound which vibrated on the ear, as if it were trying to penetrate beyond mere hearing. Kay listened, without attempting to telephone, leaning his left arm on the telephone shelf. He did not know how long he had stood there, but he stood until the landlord pulled at his coat, saying that a messenger had come to speak with him. "Go away," yelled Kay, in an access of rage, perhaps into the mouthpiece, for someone immediately answered from the other end. The following conversation ensued. "Oswald speaking? Who's there?" cried a severe, arrogant voice with a small defect in its speech, as seemed to Kay, which its owner tried to cover by an exaggerated severity. Kay hesitated to announce himself, for he was at the mercy of the telephone. The other could shout him down or hang up the receiver, and that might mean the blocking of a not unimportant way of access. Kay's hesitation made the man impatient. "Who's there?" he repeated, adding, "I should be obliged if there was less telephoning from down there. Only a minute ago someone rang up." Kay ignored this remark and announced with sudden decision, "The land surveyor's assistant speaking." "What land surveyor? What assistant?" Kay recollected yesterday's telephone conversation and said briefly, "Ask Fritz." This succeeded, to his own astonishment, but even more than at his success, he was astonished at the organization of the castle service. The answer came, "Oh, yes, that everlasting land surveyor. Quite so. What about it? What assistant?" "Joseph," said Kay. He was a little put out by the murmuring of the peasants behind his back. Obviously, they disapproved of his ruse. He had no time to bother about them, however, for the conversation absorbed all his attention. "Joseph?" came the question. "But the assistants are called..." There was a short pause, evidently to inquire the names from someone else. "Arthur and Jeremiah, these are the new assistants," said Kay. No, they are the old ones. They are the new ones. I am the old assistant. I came today after the land surveyor. No, was shouted back. Then who am I? Asked Kay as blandly as before. And after a pause, the same voice with the same defect answered him, yet with a deeper and more authoritative tone. You are the old assistant. Kay was listening to the new note and almost missed the question. What is it you want? He felt like laying down the receiver. He had ceased to expect anything from this conversation, but being pressed, he replied quickly, When can my master come to the castle? Never, was the answer. Very well, said Kay, and hung the receiver up. Behind him, the peasants had crowded quite close. His assistants, with many side glances in his direction, were trying to keep them back. But they seemed to not take the matter very seriously, and in any case, the peasants, satisfied with the result of the conversation, were beginning to give ground. A man came cleaving his way with rapid steps through the group, bowed before Kay and handed him a letter. Kay took it, but looked at the man, who for the moment seemed to him the more important. There was a great resemblance between this newcomer and the assistants. He was slim like them and clad in the same tight-fitting garments, had the same suppleness and agility, and yet he was quite different. How much Kay would have preferred him as an assistant. He reminded Kay a little of the girl with the infant whom he had seen at the tanner's. He was clothed nearly all in white, not in silk. Of course, he was in winter clothes like all the others, but the material he was wearing had the softness and dignity of silk. His face was clear and frank, his eyes larger than ordinary. His smile was unusually joyous. He drew his hand over his face as if to conceal the smile, but in vain. Who are you? Asked Kay. My name is Barnabas, said he. I am a messenger. His lips were strong and yet gentle as he spoke. Do you approve of this kind of thing? Asked Kay, pointing to the peasants for whom he was still an object of curiosity, and who stood gaping at him with their mouths open, coarse lips, and literally tortured faces. Their heads looked as if they had been beaten flat on top, and their features as if the pain of the beating had twisted them to the present shape. And yet they were not exactly gaping at him, for their eyes often flitted away and studied some indifferent object in the room before fixing on him again. And then Kay pointed also to his assistants, who stood linked together, cheek against cheek, and smiling, but whether submissively or mocking could not be determined. All these he pointed out as if presenting a train of followers forced upon him by circumstances, and as if he expected Barnabas, that indicated intimacy, it occurred to Kay, always to discriminate between him and them. But Barnabas, quite innocently, it was clear, ignored the question, letting it pass as a well-bred servant ignores some remark of his master, only apparently addressed to him, and merely surveyed the room in obedience to the question, greeting by a pressure of the hand various acquaintances among the peasants, and exchanging a few words with the assistants, all with a free independence which set him apart from the others. Rebuffed but not mortified, Kay returned to the letter in his hand and opened it. Its contents were as follows.